kind of evidence-based, or you have that kind of evidence, you have that data, you get to be able to sell the program to more and more folks because we know it works for the child, and that's who it really needs to work for.
16 countries have been brought here to this underground needs. 2 questions. 1, why was St. Vincent chosen for the launch? And secondly, how is this going to be, what is the process, the methodology to replicate all that you're agreed to throughout these 16 countries?
Well, St. Vincent was selected because it is one of the pilot countries in which the CCSI experimented with the roving caregivers program. And in fact, it has shown one of the most dramatic increases in coverage. As you know, education is a distinct priority of the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we felt in that regard, it constitutes an example of the seriousness of approach that needs to be taken with regard to better provision in that sector. As to the replication, that is happening in dialogue with ministries of education, ministries of health, governments across the region. We just moved into Belize. Belize is a major focal point. There are several governments in the region that have enunciated a policy, a priority for early childhood education. So Trinidad and Tobago, for example, has indicated that early childhood is an important priority for them. Now, the traditional approach is bricks and mortar. People are going to build daycare centers and early childhood centers. And we are saying that this model of the roving caregivers provides a very cost-effective, low capital investment approach. But what is really effective about it is not so much the lower capital investment costs, but the superior stimulation activity that happens within the early childhood process.
It's the quality of the curriculum that carries from one nation to the next. The quality of the curriculum that's been developed behind the Roving Caregivers program is very high, and it's not very expensive to implement. Every country will implement it in its own way, and that's appropriate because you want to have a stimulation that's culturally bound, that fits within the cultural context. So we can see from Belize to St. Lucia to St. Vincent that there are subtle changes both in the way in which it gets delivered and different points of emphasis in the curriculum. But it's the quality of that curriculum that carries from one place to the next and allows for replication to a degree.
Dr. Jules, you are the high-level official of the CXC. You've seen firsthand some of the, I would call, damages that have been produced along the way. You're the chairman of this board. How do you plan to cross-populate that kind of information, feed it up to the board, what needs to be done, and also take it back some of that information to the CXC?
Yeah, well, I don't think in compartments, and I think part of what we've been trying to do, CXC has over the last year or two tried to spearhead a new debate on the direction of education in the Caribbean. And our message is very simple, that we need, over the last 20 years, we've done a lot of tinkering in the education system. We've done reforms in different spheres, but we have never taken a systems-wide approach to educational transformation. And we need to think of our education systems almost like an ecosystem. If you make changes in any area, if for example you decide primary education is your priority, and you put all your attention and focus exclusively on primary education, you do so to the neglect of secondary, which is the upstream effect, or to the neglect of early childhood. And we're saying that everything has ramifications for the rest of the system. So if you focus on primary, and you may decide, okay, curriculum is the key to it, so let's have a good, solid primary curriculum. Then the issue of the readiness of the children to handle that curriculum comes to the fore. The question of the training of teachers to deliver that curriculum, the questions of the pedagogy that you're going to use, the conditions of learning under which that curriculum will be delivered, the issue of the assessment of the curriculum. So it's not a simple matter of believing that, as we have done in the past, that one solution provides the answer to everything. We have to look holistically at the system And that is why we are saying that if you step back and you look at the Caribbean education landscape, the big gap, glaring gap in education is in early childhood. And for the reasons discussed earlier, what Lisa explained about the development of the brain and so on, it means that we are actually putting children into the education system already handicapped. Right? Our education system from that perspective is a system of disabled children because we have not prepared them so that their intellectual and cognitive and emotional capability is ready to receive and deal with the formal education that you receive from primary up.
25 to 30% of the kids in the Caribbean don't have the cognitive building blocks they need when they start at school.
25 to 30%.
25 to 30%. Seriously. And if you walk into school without that basic building blocks from which you can learn to read and write, you're already at a deficit. That's what Dr. Jules means when he says it's already remedial, or that the children are walking in without the basic skills that they need in order to be able to absorb the curriculum, to absorb the lesson that's being taught to them. So the investment in early childhood helped to correct that problem. You don't want to lose 30% of your kids before you've even started.
Final statements on what you thought has been achieved over the period or the year. Did you meet your objectives? What lessons have you learned? And what's the next step?
So my visit, of course, has been quite a bit shorter. But I have been deeply impressed with the commitment of the government from top to bottom, from the Prime Minister right on down to the healthcare workers that I was able to meet with this afternoon, to everybody's commitment to young children here. And I hope that what we will be able to see with the foundation support is an integration right across the whole system of government service here in this particular country, where the government has committed with help from the private sector and with help from the foundation to service the very youngest children from 0 to 3. But it's so refreshing to come somewhere where everybody understands what's at stake and can talk about it in an educated way, in a passionate way, regardless of the role that they play, either as a direct service deliverer or as a politician or as the permanent secretary. So it's been a wonderful visit in that sense.
Well, for us, our objective was really to convey the latest state-of-the-art information to, especially on the brain development side, to practitioners, so that they are armed, better armed to continue the struggle that they have been pursuing for recognition and for greater engagement in that sector. And also to light a fire, because we really need to do what we do in the Caribbean with greater passion. Education is not business as usual, and it cannot be. And we need to approach it with imagination and with fire so that we can succeed. And I think we've succeeded in starting that fire, and we hope that the foundation can fan those flames so it becomes a real brush fire across the region.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Of our illustrious audience, right? She just walked in.
She just walked in.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions, please.
Where do you represent?
Social newspaper.
Why the media always show up late?
Yeah?
Why do the media always show up late?